Namaskar, this is Shivangi Mukherjee and welcome to another episode of Bharat, the Forgotten Chapters. Before Kashmir became the India-Pakistan flashpoint we know today, before the LOC, before Article 370, before PoK, Kashmir was part of the Sikh empire of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. In 1819, Ranjit Singh's forces defeated the Afghan rulers and brought Kashmir into the Sikh empire. And for the next few decades, Kashmir was governed from Lahore. But then the Anglo-Sikh Wars changed everything. The Sikh Empire collapsed. The British took control. And in 1846, under the Treaty of Amritsar, the British transferred Jammu and Kashmir to Gulab Singh for 75 lakh rupees. His successors ruled the princely states until the reign of Maharaja Hari Singh, who inherited Kashmir at one of the most consequential moments in history. But before we get to Hari Singh, let's rewind, because Kashmir's history is far older than 1947. Tradition says the name Kashmir comes from Ka, meaning water, and Shmira, meaning to desiccate. The ancient legend is that Kashmir was once a lake, drained by the sage Kashyapa to make the land habitable. Kashmir for this reason was also called Kashyapamira, or the land of Kashyapa. Historically, Kashmir became part of the Mauryan Empire under Ashoka around the 3rd century BCE, and he is traditionally credited with establishing Srinagar. Buddhism subsequently spread through the region, particularly under the Kushans. Then came the Karkotas in the 7th century, followed by the Utpala dynasty in the 9th century, and rulers such as Avantivarman. Then came Didda, one of Kashmir's most powerful medieval queens. And among the most famous rulers was Lalitaditya Muktapira, remembered today for the magnificent Martanda Sun Temple. Then came centuries of changing dynasties and empires, Muslim dynasties, the Mughals, Afghans, and finally the Sikhs. So when someone tells you Kashmir's history began in 1947, you can politely tell them the valley has been making history for a very, very long time. Now let's get to 1947. British India was partitioned into India and Pakistan, and the princely states had to decide the future. Maharaja Hari Singh initially wanted Jammu and Kashmir to remain independent. He signed standstill agreements with Pakistan and sought to maintain the existing status quo. He even sent an agreement to India. But India wanted to negotiate it further. Then came the event that changed everything. In October 1947, Pakistan-backed tribal forces invaded Jammu and Kashmir, advancing towards Srinagar. Hari Singh's forces were unable to stop this invasion. He needed military assistance. India was willing to help, but there was one legal condition. If Indian troops were going to defend Kashmir, Kashmir had to legally accede to India. And the Maharaja had a choice: continue trying to remain independent or seek help from India. He chose India. So on 26th of October 1947, Maharaja Hari Singh signed the instrument of accession to India. Governor General Lord Mountbatten accepted it on 27th of October, and Indian troops were airlifted into Srinagar. And that is the crucial point. The accession came in the middle of an invasion. India did not simply wake up one morning and decide to acquire Kashmir. There was a legal instrument of accession, followed by military intervention to defend its territory. The instrument of accession initially gave India authority over 3 principal subjects: defense, external affairs, and communication. Later, Jammu and Kashmir received a special constitutional arrangement through Article 370. But while Indian forces fought on one side, the war continued. By the time a ceasefire took effect on 1st of January 1949, Pakistan managed to retain control over a significant portion of the former princely state. That territory is what India calls Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, or PoK. Pakistan, on the other hand, calls the western part Azad Jammu and Kashmir, while the northern region Gilgit-Baltistan. And here's where the terminology itself becomes political. Pakistan says this is Azad Kashmir, free Kashmir. But free from whom? Because the territory came under Pakistani control following the 1947 conflict, and India maintains that the entire former princely states legally acceded to India. The ceasefire line established after the war later became the Line of Control, or LOC, after the Shimla Agreement of 1972. And that line remains today. But Pakistan's control didn't stop there. Over time, Gilgit-Baltistan was separated administratively from what Pakistan called Azad Kashmir, and Pakistan progressively integrated it into its own political structure. Now, this is where Kashmir's story gets even more complicated, because the Kashmir that India administered did not exactly have the same constitutional relationship as the rest of India. Enter Article 370. Article 370 provided Jammu and Kashmir with a special constitutional arrangement. Initially, India's parliament had limited powers over the state, primarily concerning defense, external affairs, and communications, with other provisions extended to constitutional mechanisms. Jammu and Kashmir also had its own constitution and its own flag. Then in 1954, Article 35A was introduced to a presidential order. Now, what did this Article 35A do? It allowed the Jammu and Kashmir legislature to define who qualified as a permanent resident, and those permanent residents received special rights relating to land ownership, government employment, scholarships, and other benefits. For decades, this became one of the most distinctive constitutional arrangements in India. Until August 2019, the Government of India made Article 370 inoperative and removed the constitutional basis for Article 35A. At the same time, Parliament passed the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganisation Act. The former state was divided into two union territories, Jammu and Kashmir with a legislature and Ladakh without a legislature. And in December 2023, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutional validity of the changes it made to Article 370. Now here's the interesting part. While India was changing the constitutional arrangement of the territory it administered, Pakistan continued to describe the territory it controlled as Azad Kashmir. So let's take a look at how this supposedly free territory actually functions. And this is where you'll notice the democratic mathematic getting a little creative at Pakistan's end. The Azad Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly has 53 seats, but only 45 are direct seats. And even those 45 aren't elected by people actually living inside Azad Kashmir. Only 33 are contested within the territory itself. The remaining 12 seats are reserved for Kashmiri refugees living elsewhere in Pakistan. The breakdown of this 12 is 6 representing refugees associated with Jammu and 6 associated with the Kashmir Valley. So imagine this. You have a territory of Kashmir. You hold an election for its parliament. And 12 of the 45 general seats are voted for by people living outside the territory. Now add the other 8 seats. 5 are reserved for women, 1 for a technocrat or professional, 1 is for a religious scholar, the ulama-e-din or mashaykh category, and 1 represents Kashmiris living overseas. That gives you 33 local constituencies, plus 12 refugee constituencies, plus 8 indirectly elected seats, bringing the total to 53 seats. And here's the kicker, those 8 aren't elected to ordinary constituency voting either. They are filled indirectly through the Assembly's elected members. Pakistan-administered Kashmir's own statistical yearbook confirms the 45 direct and 8 indirect structure. So you have a territory advertised as Azad, but its legislature includes seats elected outside the territory, indirectly filled seats, and a political structure in which Pakistan continues to exercise considerable influence, which makes the word Azad sound increasingly like a marketing department came up with it. And the biggest controversy right now is precisely those 12 refugee seats. Critics inside argue that people who live elsewhere in Pakistan are being able to influence who governs a territory they themselves don't live in. And because the assembly only has 53 seats, those 12 seats aren't some decorative little footnote. They can potentially decide who gets a majority. In fact, this issue has become one of the major flashpoints behind the current protests and electoral controversy. There's another rather uncomfortable contradiction. Pakistan's federal government maintains a Ministry of Kashmir Affairs in Gilgit-Baltistan, while the Kashmir Council also exercises powers over affairs in the territory. Now, this council has 14 members, including Pakistan's Prime Minister as its chairman, along with representatives from the territory and members nominated by Pakistan's federal government. So the question becomes pretty simple. If this is genuinely an autonomous Azad Kashmir, why does Islamabad retain so much institutional control over it? There's an even bigger contradiction. Pakistan has repeatedly invoked the idea of a UN-mandated plebiscite for Kashmir. But the condition set by UN for a plebiscite was demilitarization of PoK, which Pakistan never performed. So the plebiscite never took place. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. The political framework inside Pakistan-administered Kashmir itself requires office holders to affirm the territory's accession to Pakistan, while its constitutional framework bars political activity considered detrimental to that accession. In simple words, PoK officers sworn in need to pledge their allegiance to Pakistan. and cannot say anything that would harm Pakistan's claim over Azad Kashmir. So the supposed referendum everyone keeps talking about already comes with some very interesting fine print. And today, people living in PoK are increasingly asking questions of their own about their electricity bills, food prices, taxation, political representation, and whether their vote actually matters. The current unrest is particularly striking because the territory has postponed its third phase of elections, citing law and order issues. The elections were supposed to be held on August 10th. The protests have turned deadly. Since June, around 90 deaths have been reported and over 200 have been injured. The Pakistani government's response has included accusing protesters of being anti-national or India-backed, allegations that protesters reject. And that brings us to the uncomfortable irony. Today, people living in the part of Kashmir Pakistan controls are themselves protesting against the occupant governing them. They're complaining about economic hardship. They're challenging the structure of elections. They're questioning why seats are allocated to people living outside the territory. They're asking if this is the Azad Kashmir that Pakistan promised them, then why are Kashmiris not being heard? But perhaps after everything we've discussed, we need to take a step back and ask a bigger question. Is Kashmir really just a dispute between India and Pakistan? Because Kashmir's story began thousands of years before. Sati Sat, Kashyapa, Ashoka, Lalitaditya, Martanda. These aren't exactly footnotes to a modern geopolitical dispute. They are the civilizational foundations of Kashmir. This is the land of Shankaracharya and Trika or Kashmiri Shaivism. And at the heart of the civilization were the Kashmiri Pandits, whose roots in the valley stretch back centuries. But in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Pakistan-backed militancy brought targeted killings, intimidation, and a genocide that drove a large number of Kashmiri Hindus from their ancestral homes. The chilling message associated with this extremist campaign was Raliv, Galiv, or Chaliv. That is, convert, die, or leave. Decades later, many still haven't been able to return, and so Kashmir cannot be reduced to a line on a map or a dispute between just two countries. It is a civilization that existed long before the line was drawn, and until those driven from their ancestral homes can return with dignity and security, the story of Kashmir remains unfinished. If you've stayed with me this far, here's a question for you. What was the crucial step that legally brought Jammu and Kashmir into India in 1947? If you know the answer, write down your responses in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.